Welcome to the Global War Watch Network. Today, we're zeroing in on a topic that sits really at the very heart of global security concerns.
Absolutely. It's been simmering for years.
Iran claims its nuclear program is solely for peaceful purposes, but, well, is that really the case? We'll expose the truth behind Iran's nuclear ambitions and explore the potential for conflict in this incredibly volatile region.
It's a crucial question.
For decades, Iran has steadfastly maintained, that its nuclear activities are solely for peaceful energy generation. Yet the international community has had persistent nagging alarms about a clandestine pursuit of nuclear weapons.
Those alarms have only gotten louder over time.
We're going to walk you through how this complex, often shadowy history reached a critical, really an explosive point in 2025, and what happened when diplomacy finally hit its absolute limit.
That's right. This isn't a news story by any stretch, but it certainly reached a dramatic, undeniable inflection point this year. What's truly fascinating here is tracing Iran's nuclear trajectory, understanding the intricate, high-stakes diplomatic dance it engaged in with the U.S. and other world powers, and then, inevitably, analyzing these significant military actions that unfolded just this year.
The strife.
Exactly. Grasping the underlying motivations and the precarious, often terrifying balance of power in play is absolutely key to grasping the full picture.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with some crucial historical context. Because Iran's nuclear program didn't just suddenly appear, did it?
Not at all. It's a journey that spans well over 50 years.
50 years, and from its very inception, Iran has consistently claimed that its nuclear aims are purely peaceful, primarily focused on electricity generation.
That's been the official line, yes.
But then came the early 2000s, and that's when revelations about secret nuclear sites and clandestine research really started ringing very loud alarm bells for the international community.
Indeed. That's when the trust really began to erode significantly. While Iran reportedly suspended its formal nuclear weapons program back in 2003, the reality on the ground was, well, far more ambiguous.
How so?
Weaponization efforts, those critical steps needed to turn fissile material into an actual bomb, undeniably continued. This included enriching uranium to levels that were dangerously close to weapons grade, even if not fully there yet.
Close, but not quite 90% yet at that stage.
Not consistently, but pushing the boundaries. And what's more, Iran, operating under the command of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, has also been relentlessly developing long-range ballistic missile technology.
Right, the missiles are a huge part of this story, too.
A massive part. Some of these designs are based on North Korean models, and they're not merely defensive. They are capable of striking targets up to 3,000 kilometers away.
3,000 kilometers. That puts parts of Europe squarely within their reach.
Absolutely. It's also worth noting that Iran possesses the largest ballistic missile inventory in the entire Middle East. This capability isn't just about deterring an attack, it's about projecting power and, quite frankly, a potential threat across a vast region.
So with these escalating concerns and this undeniable, dangerous capability, the world tried to step in with diplomacy. This led us to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the JCPOA, signed in 2015.
Ah, yes, the JCPOA, a moment of, well, attempted compromise.
It was a truly monumental agreement forged in July of that year, bringing together Iran, the P5+1 nations, that's China, France, Germany, Russia, the UK, and the US plus the European Union.
A big diplomatic effort.
And the primary overarching goal of this deal was to effectively roll back and unwind Iran's nuclear program to ensure what was termed a one-year breakout time.
And that one-year breakout time wasn't just a technical term. It was the international community's critical safety net. The core insight here is that the deal wasn't designed to prevent Iran from ever having the theoretical ability to build a bomb.
Right. It was about the timeline.
Exactly. It was to ensure world powers had a full year to detect if they decided to break out and produce enough fissile material, giving them crucial time to respond diplomatically or even militarily. That strategic buying of time was arguably the agreement's most vital and often misunderstood purpose.
Okay, so how did it aim to achieve that?
To achieve this, the JCPOA had very specific, robust provisions. On the nuclear restrictions front, Iran agreed not to produce highly enriched uranium, or HEU, or plutonium for weapons. Their key facilities, places like Fordo, Natanz, and Arak, were strictly limited to civilian work.
So limits on production, limits on facilities.
And severe limitations on the number and types of centrifuges they could operate, and strict caps on enrichment levels. For instance, 5% for power generation, 20% for research, well below the 90% needed for actual weapons-grade material, as well as limits on the total size of their enriched uranium stockpile.
Beyond just setting limits, the deal included remarkably robust monitoring and verification measures, didn't it?
It did. Iran agreed to what was called an additional protocol, which gave the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, unfettered access to its declared nuclear sites.
Unfettered access is key.
Crucially, yes. And even the ability to inspect potentially undeclared locations if suspicions arose. The IAEA would then issue quarterly compliance reports, providing a critical layer of transparency.
And in return for all this, what did Iran get?
In return for these sweeping nuclear commitments, Iran was promised significant sanctions relief. The EU, UN, and the US lifted nuclear-related sanctions, especially on oil exports, which was aimed at providing desperately needed economic relief and reintegrating Iran into the global economy.
But not all sanctions were lifted, right?
That's absolutely vital to remember. Other U.S. sanctions, particularly those related to ballistic missiles, terrorism support, and human rights, remain firmly in place. The JCPOA was specifically about the nuclear file.
Okay.
Of course, the JCPOA also included a critical safeguard known as the snapback mechanism.
Ah, the snapback. Explain that.
This was a powerful, almost unprecedented provision allowing any signatory, any one of them, to unilaterally reimpose UN sanctions if Iran was found to be in violation of the agreement.
So a quick way to punish non-compliance.
Exactly. It was designed to be a very strong deterrent, a clear threat of economic pain, but its ultimate effectiveness would unfortunately be tested in ways its architects hadn't fully foreseen.
Indeed. Because this moment of compromise, this painstakingly constructed diplomatic effort, ultimately didn't last. In 2018, the United States, under President Donald Trump, officially withdrew from the JCPOA.
A hugely controversial decision.
President Trump famously called it a giant fiction, arguing it was fundamentally inadequate because it didn't address Iran's escalating ballistic missile program or its problematic support for proxy groups across the region. This withdrawal sent shockwaves.
Complete shockwaves. And following that dramatic withdrawal, the U.S. reimposed what it termed a maximum pressure campaign.
Maximum pressure, that sounds intense.
It was. This wasn't just a minor tweak. It involved severe, crippling economic sanctions that drastically impacted Iran's economy, particularly by cutting off its vital oil exports. This was designed to bring Iran to its knees financially.
And did the Biden administration try to fix it?
Well, the subsequent Biden administration did attempt to hold talks with Iran, but they ultimately proved unsuccessful in either bringing the U.S. back into the original deal or achieving any new comprehensive agreement. The diplomatic channel, for all intents and purposes, remained deeply strained.
So the deal was effectively dead from the U.S. perspective. What did Iran do?
Well, from May 2019 onwards, in direct retaliation for the U.S. withdrawal and the reimposed sanctions, Iran began incrementally exceeding the JCPOA limits.
Incrementally at first.
At first, they increased uranium enrichment to higher concentrations and stockpiled low-enriched uranium far beyond the agreed-upon amounts. They also started developing new, more efficient and advanced centrifuges, and even resumed heavy water production.
Things escalated even further after the U.S. killing of General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020, didn't they?
Dramatically. At that point, Iran declared it would no longer limit its uranium enrichment at all. The gloves were off, essentially.
So no more limits?
None. By October 2020, they began constructing a new, massive centrifuge production center at the Nans, and in November of that same year, Iran's parliament legislated a substantial boost in uranium enrichment at the Fordo facility in direct response to the assassination of a prominent nuclear scientist.
So step by step, they're ramping things up considerably.
Massively. And all of this truly sets the stage for the dramatic, high-stakes events of 2025. By early that year, the reports from international observers were stark and chilling. Iran is closer to a bomb than ever before.
Closer than ever. What specifically made them say that?
What was particularly alarming was Iran's open escalation of uranium enrichment to a purity of 60%. This is a level that, I really can't stress this enough, has absolutely no credible civilian use or justification, especially when accumulated in the quantities they possessed.
60%. That sounds very high.
It's technically just short of weapons grade, but incredibly close. The IAEA reported that Iran had amassed approximately 250 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%.
250 kilograms. What does that translate to in terms of weapon potential?
To put that into perspective, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence concluded that Iran had accumulated sufficient fissile material for more than a dozen nuclear weapons.
More than a dozen, wow.
And according to the Institute for Science and International Security, or ISIS, a highly respected analytical group, Iran could enrich enough uranium for one nuclear bomb in just 1 week and accumulate enough for 7 bombs within a single month.
1 week for the first bomb? That's incredibly fast.
Astonishingly fast. This wasn't just a threat, it was a rapidly approaching reality. Iranian officials themselves even began hinting that the religious ruling forbidding nuclear weapons, a long-standing position, could change.
So they're even signaling a potential policy shift.
Exactly. You see Iran here consistently pushing the boundaries after the U.S. withdrawal, gradually accumulating capabilities that raised and continue to raise incredibly serious questions about its ultimate intentions. This trajectory from 2019 to early 2025 wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate, calculated path.
And what the international community knew about Iran's true nuclear capabilities and their potential for rapid weaponization just before these 2025 negotiations was absolutely vital. It begs the question, how much insight did they truly have?
That's a critical question.
Because, as we'll see, the ability to monitor Iran's activities was already severely hampered. This takes us straight into the desperate, high-stakes 2025 negotiations.
A real last-ditch effort, it seemed.
This diplomatic effort was initiated by President Trump himself, who sent a direct letter to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in March 2025. That letter wasn't just an invitation, it was a stark ultimatum.
It really was, laying down the law.
It demanded the full dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program, an immediate halt to all uranium enrichment, and a complete end to its support for proxy groups across the Middle East. And there was a firm, non-negotiable deadline attached. 2 months, or precisely 60 days.
60 days. That's incredibly tight for such complex issues.
And with a clear, unambiguous warning of serious military consequences if those demands weren't met, it was a take-it-or-leave-it proposition.
High-stakes diplomacy, to say the least.
What was Iran's initial reaction? Did they just dismiss it?
Initially, as one might expect from a sovereign nation, there was significant reluctance from the Iranian side. However, internal reports indicated that advisors strongly warned Khamenei that the regime faced potential collapse.
Collapse? Why?
It wasn't just about external threats. It was due to the combined pressure of mounting war threats from the U.S. and its allies, coupled with an already deepening severe economic crisis within Iran.
So internal and external pressure combined.
Exactly. This intense pressure ultimately compelled Iran to accept the talks, albeit under duress, hoping to find an off-ramp from a rapidly accelerating collision course.
So with the deadline ticking, the negotiation rounds kicked off. The very first round took place on April 12th in Muscat, Oman, a neutral ground often used for such delicate diplomacy.
Oman has often played that role, yes.
It was led by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi. Despite the high tensions, it was surprisingly described as constructive.
Constructive is always a hopeful sign, but often just diplomatic language.
During this initial round, Iran reportedly presented a rather intriguing 3-step plan. First, they proposed a temporary halt to high-level enrichment in exchange for the unfreezing of assets and immediate authorization for oil exports.
Okay, a phased approach, linking actions to relief.
Second, they offered a permanent halt to all high-level enrichment and the restoration of full IAEA inspections, but only in exchange for further, broader sanctions lifting.
So deeper concessions for broader relief.
Right.
Makes sense.
And third, and critically, they wanted U.S. congressional approval for full sanctions lifting and the immediate transfer of their highly enriched uranium to a third, non-threatening country.
Congressional approval would be a huge hurdle, given the political climate in the U.S.
Absolutely. And there was even an alleged incredibly significant offer from Iran to disarm and freeze the activities of their various powerful proxy groups, Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hashd al-Shaabi.
Wow, that's huge if true, addressing the regional behavior aspect directly.
A substantial shift, if accurate, signaling a willingness to negotiate beyond just the nuclear issue.
The discussions, mediated indirectly by Oman, continued with a second round on April 19th in Rome, Italy. At this point, the stakes were so high that President Trump himself even expressed openness to meeting Supreme Leader Khamenei directly, highlighting the unprecedented nature of these engagements.
A potential Trump-Khamenei meeting, that would have been historic.
Unthinkable just months before. However, despite the initial glimmers of progress, the third round, held on April 26th back in Muscat, truly brought to light the enduring, almost intractable challenges.
So the optimism faded quickly.
It seems so. These were high-level talks, marking the first time expert-level discussions led by Michael Anton for the U.S. took place. While progress was cautiously reported, the joint statements acknowledged that key differences remained, which was, frankly, an understatement given the history.
And these key differences are absolutely critical, forming the bedrock of the impasse, weren't they?
They were the core issues, yes. Iran insisted on retaining its existing enriched uranium stockpile within its own borders, viewing it as a sovereign right and a vital piece of leverage.
They didn't want to give it up.
No. The U.S., conversely, adamantly demanded it be transferred out of the country to a third party, seeing it as a direct proliferation risk. That was a fundamental clash.
And the other major sticking point.
Iran's demand for ironclad guarantees against any future U.S. withdrawal from or violation of any potential new agreement. This was a clear and understandable response to the painful memory of the 2018 JCPOA pullout, demonstrating the profound trust deficit that plagued these talks.
They didn't want to get burned again.
Precisely. From this point on, the tensions truly began to boil over. France, a key JCPOA signatory, issued a blunt warning that it was prepared to trigger the snapback UN sanctions if no deal was reached, emphasizing the international impatience and concern.
So Europe was losing patience too.
Iran, however, dismissed this as merely a strategy of confrontation, refusing to buckle. On April 30th, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned 6 Chinese chemical companies directly linked to Iran, demonstrating continued targeted economic pressure, even amidst negotiations.
Sending mixed signals, perhaps, negotiating while sanctioning?
Or just keeping the pressure on relentlessly. Militarily, the rhetoric sharpened dramatically. On May 1st, U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth warned Iran would pay dearly for its continued support of Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, a critical global shipping lane.
Connecting the nuclear issue to regional actions again.
Exactly. President Trump echoed this, threatening secondary sanctions on anyone buying Iranian oil, aiming to further choke their economy. Even Senator Rubio weighed in, warning Iran to walk away from nuclear enrichment entirely.
And Iran's response.
In a clear sign of the deteriorating climate, Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi abruptly canceled a May 4th meeting for what were vaguely described as technical reasons, effectively signaling a diplomatic freeze.
And things were falling apart.
Rapidly, Trump continued to call for full dismantlement of Iran's nuclear enrichment program, leaving no room for compromise. Iran, in turn, responded with outright defiance, showcasing a new ballistic missile and threatening to hit U.S. military bases across the region.
Tit-for-tat threats.
And very dangerous ones. Revolutionary Guard General Salami, a powerful figure, warned that the IRGC would open hellgates on any invaders.
Strong words.
And then adding another layer of deep controversy and insult. On May 7th, U.S. officials reported President Trump's plan to officially refer to the Persian Gulf as the Arabian Gulf, a symbolic move that drew immediate and furious outrage across the entire political spectrum in Iran, viewed as a direct attack on their national identity.
That seems deliberately provocative.
Many saw it that way. To further muddy these already troubled waters, Fox News released a video alleging a secret Iranian nuclear weapons facility sensationally dubbed the Rainbow Site, which Iran swiftly rejected as fabricated Israeli propaganda.
More accusations, more denials. The trust was just gone.
Completely evaporated. The warnings from the U.S. side grew more stark, with Envoy Witkoff stating that if the next round of talks weren't productive, they won't continue. In parallel, and perhaps predictably, Supreme Leader Khamenei publicly endorsed Death to America chants, underscoring the profound, almost unbridgeable ideological divides.
So any hope left by the 4th round?
The 4th round of negotiations, on May 11th in Oman, was described again as difficult but constructive, that familiar diplomatic euphemism for talks teetering on the brink.
Difficult but constructive.
Okay.
Interestingly, during this round, Iran allegedly proposed a joint nuclear enrichment project with regional Arab states and even proposed U.S. investment in it. A highly unusual and ambitious idea, though Witkoff later denied it was formally discussed.
A regional enrichment project. That's unexpected.
Very. Regardless, the U.S. swiftly imposed new sanctions targeting Iranian nuclear research and its ballistic missile program, even as talks continued. Key U.S. senators expressed strong opposition to any deal that would allow any enrichment, demanding complete dismantlement, effectively tying the administration's hands.
So internal U.S. politics were also playing a huge role.
Immensely. Then came Trump's May proposal, which he attempted to frame as an olive branch, publicly claiming the U.S. was very close to a deal and preferred peace to conflict.
An olive branch.
Yeah.
How was it received? Not well. Supreme Leader Khamenei, in a fiery speech, swiftly rejected the proposal as excessive and outrageous, directly accusing Trump of lying and famously calling Israel a cancerous tumor in the region.
Wow. So much for the olive branch.
He vehemently reiterated Iran's right to uranium enrichment as central to its national interest and absolutely non-negotiable. At the same time, Iran was holding parallel talks with European powers in Istanbul, perhaps hedging its bets.
Playing multiple angles, what about the fifth round?
The fifth round, on May 23rd in Rome, yielded no breakthrough whatsoever. The core disagreement, the U.S. demand for Iran to dismantle its entire enrichment program, remained unacceptable to Iran.
Still stuck on the same fundamental point.
Absolutely. Compounding this, Austrian intelligence reported that Iran was actively pursuing an advanced nuclear weapons program with nuclear-capable ballistic missiles. Iran, of course, rejected this as false and baseless, also denying they had agreed to any 3-year enrichment pause.
The accusations kept flying.
Then on June 12th, the IAEA, after months of mounting frustration, delivered a truly significant blow. For the first time in 20 years, they formally declared Iran in breach of its non-proliferation obligation.
Declared them in breach. That's serious.
Extremely serious. They specifically cited Iran's abject failure to address long-standing questions about undeclared nuclear material and activities at various sites, as well as its alarming record accumulation of highly enriched uranium.
And Iran's reaction?
Predictably, they dismissed the resolution as politically motivated and promptly announced plans to build a new enrichment site, further demonstrating their defiance and refusal to cooperate. This was a clear sign that diplomatic pressure alone was simply not working.
Just digging their heels in deeper.
Completely. And so on June 9th, Iran formally rejected the Trump administration's proposal as unacceptable and announced its own counteroffer through the Yemeni mediators. The main disagreements remain the same: Iran's insistence on its inherent right to domestic uranium enrichment, fundamental differences over how its highly enriched uranium stockpiles would be managed, and crucially, the conditions for lifting sanctions.
What were their conditions for sanctions relief?
Iran specifically demanded tangible economic benefits from sanctions relief, including firm guarantees of restored banking and trade ties with other countries, and they wanted these before any sanctions were actually lifted, demonstrating their deep distrust.
They wanted guarantees up front.
Yes. As a chilling final warning, Iranian Defense Minister Aziz Nasirzadeh warned that Iran would target American bases in the region if talks collapsed.
Open threats of military retaliation.
Yes. So what does this all mean? The negotiations were a brutal roller coaster of fleeting hope and overt threats. But fundamentally, it seems both sides held firm on their core, irreconcilable demands, leading to an inevitable deadlock. And then, the diplomacy completely broke down.
It just collapsed under the weight of mistrust and inflexibility.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it starkly underscores the profound, almost irreparable lack of trust that had severely degraded the entire diplomatic environment. Iran viewed its enrichment capabilities not just as a sovereign right, but as vital leverage, a bargaining chip against international pressure.
And the U.S. saw it differently.
Completely. The U.S. saw it as an undeniable proliferation threat that needed to be dismantled, period. This created an absolute impasse, a zero-sum game that, unfortunately, history tells us often leads to other, far more dangerous forms of engagement.
Which brings us to a critical, almost terrifying look at Iran's nuclear capabilities just before the military strikes. What exactly did they have at that point?
As of the May 2025 IAEA report, Iran's stockpile of 60% highly enriched uranium, or HEU, had surged to an astonishing 408.6 kilograms in uranium mass.
400 kilograms of 60% HEU.
What's absolutely critical to understand here is that this level of enrichment, 60%, has no civilian use or justification whatsoever, especially when accumulated in such vast quantities. It's simply not needed for power reactors or medical isotopes.
So having that much 60% enriched uranium is inherently suspicious.
Highly suspicious.
Yep.
Here's where the numbers become truly alarming. That 60% HEU is essentially 99% of the way to 90% weapon-grade uranium in terms of the enrichment effort required.
99% of the way there. Explain that.
It's not linear. The hardest part of the enrichment journey is already done. Think of it like climbing a mountain. Getting from natural uranium to 60% purity is incredibly difficult and takes immense effort and sophisticated technology. Getting from that 60% to the summit at 90% weapon grade is comparatively much easier and faster.
Okay, so they've done the hardest part already.
Pretty much. This amount of material could potentially yield multiple nuclear weapons if Iran decided to further refine it. Their total enriched uranium stock was a staggering 900 and 247.6 kilograms, a huge amount of material overall.
Wow. And they were making more 60% HEU.
Yes, they were converting 20% enriched uranium to 60% HEU at an expanded, almost unsustainable rate, showing a clear, aggressive push toward higher purity.
What about the machines themselves, the centrifuges?
Their infrastructure was equally, if not more, concerning. They had nearly 14,689 advanced centrifuges. These are the powerful IR2 meters, IR4, and IR6 models installed at both Natanz and Fordo.
Nearly 15,000 advanced centrifuges.
When you include their older, less efficient IR1s, the total reaches around 21,900 centrifuges. This wasn't just a handful of machines, it was a massive, sophisticated network.
And what does that mean in terms of production speed?
Their total installed enrichment capacity was roughly 64,000 separative work units, or SW, per year, with an actual enriching capacity of around 50,000 SW per year. Now, this separative work unit, or SW, is essentially the measure of how much work is done to enrich uranium.
Like horsepower for enrichment.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The more SWU capacity they have, the faster they can produce highly enriched uranium, and the quicker they can get to bomb-grade material.
And Fordo was particularly worrying, wasn't it?
Yes, the Fordo Fuel Enrichment Plant, an underground facility built deep inside a mountain, could also be very easily and quickly modified for weapon-grade uranium production, making it incredibly resilient to conventional attack.
So, massive stockpile, advanced machines, hardened facilities.
Exactly. This overwhelming technical capability led to a truly alarming conclusion from the Institute for Science and International Security, or ISIS. Iran's formal breakout timeline remains at 0.
Zero breakout time. What does that mean precisely?
This isn't just a technical term. It means they could move from being a threshold state, meaning they have the capability and the material, to potentially producing enough material for a weapon almost immediately, at a moment of their choosing. They were literally at the brink.
So they can start making weapons-grade material basically overnight.
With their May 2025 stock of 60% AKH-EU, ISIS reported that Iran could produce its first 25 kilograms of weapon-grade uranium, enough for one bomb in the Fordo facility, in as little as 2 to 3 days.
2 to 3 days.
Fordo alone, that underground fortress, could produce enough weapon-grade uranium for 9 nuclear weapons in just 3 weeks. That's an astonishing speed.
9 bombs worth in 3 weeks from just one facility.
And the numbers get even more stark if they were to utilize all their capabilities. If both Fordo and the Natanz fuel enrichment plant were simultaneously used, they could produce enough weapon-grade uranium for 11 nuclear weapons in the first month, and potentially up to 22 nuclear weapons by the end of the 5th month.
22 bombs worth in 5 months. That's a serious arsenal potential.
These aren't just hypotheticals. These are calculations based on their existing infrastructure and stockpiles. Regarding weaponization itself actually building the bomb, ISIS concluded that Iran could potentially test a nuclear explosive underground or deploy a crude nuclear weapon just 6 months after making a firm decision to build one.
6 months from decision to potential test or crude weapon.
Yes. They also noted that Iran could reestablish its pre-2003 Ahmad Plan infrastructure, which was explicitly designed for the serial production of nuclear weapons within about 2 years.
So the weaponization knowledge was still there too.
The underlying knowledge and planning, yes. What compounds all this alarming data is the severely limited International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, monitoring.
Right, you mentioned they were hampering inspections.
Severely. Since February 2021, Iran progressively and quite deliberately curtailed IAEA access. They stopped implementing the additional protocol, which granted broader inspection rights, and systematically removed surveillance equipment like cameras.
So the IAEA was becoming blind.
Increasingly so. This led directly to a loss of continuity of knowledge regarding their centrifuge production, heavy water activities, and uranium ore concentrate. This severely diminished the IAEA's ability to truly verify the peaceful nature of Iran's program or critically detect diversions of nuclear material to undeclared facilities.
And they kicked out inspectors too.
They even de-designated experienced IAEA inspectors, effectively removing expert eyes, further undermining effective safeguards, and leaving the world largely in the dark about the specifics.
One last technical point, uranium metal. What's the significance there?
And we cannot forget about uranium metal production. While its active production had reportedly been halted since fall 2021, the capability to produce it remained fully intact.
Why is uranium metal important?
Uranium metal isn't typically used for power generation. It is a crucial component used in the core of nuclear weapons. So retaining the capability to make it, even if not actively producing, was a profound and serious concern for non-proliferation experts.
Okay, so putting it all together, the sheer amount of highly enriched material, the advanced centrifuges, the zero breakout time, the limited inspections.
What's fascinating here is the dual-use nature of the technology Iran had amassed and the very high purity of the uranium they were producing. When you combine this advanced technical capability with the drastically reduced transparency and the aggressive political posturing, it doesn't just suggest, it strongly indicates a strategic intent to be prepared to produce large quantities of weapon-grade uranium very quickly at a moment's notice.
It looks like they were ready to make a move if they chose to.
That's certainly how it appeared to many observers. This raises an important question. What were the immediate consequences when these escalating capabilities and the failed exhaustive negotiations finally collided?
The answer came swiftly and decisively. The catalyst for military action was the undeniable expiration of President Trump's 2-month deadline without any diplomatic agreement in sight.
The deadline passed, and the fuse was lit.
After that deadline passed, the window for dialogue slammed shut and Israel launched its attacks. President Trump later publicly stated that the deadline had indeed expired, implicitly and quite explicitly justifying the military actions that followed.
On June 13, 2025, Israel launched what they termed Operation Rising Lion, a large-scale, coordinated offensive hitting over a dozen strategically chosen locations across Iran.
Over a dozen locations. What were they targeting?
Their stated goal was crystal clear: to prevent nuclear weapons development and dismantle critical infrastructure. Key targets included military leaders, and devastatingly, at least 9 leading nuclear scientists were killed in those initial strikes. Even Eliashim Khani, a prominent figure who had overseen the sensitive negotiations, was targeted.
Targeting scientists and negotiators, that's highly escalatory.
Extremely. These strikes revealed an incredibly deep penetration of intelligence, particularly by Mossad, into Iran's nuclear program, highlighting how precisely and effectively Israel was able to identify and target these vital assets.
What was Iran's immediate reaction to the Israeli strikes?
Iran's immediate response was both dramatic and predictable. They immediately pulled out of and indefinitely suspended nuclear talks. Iranian officials declared that a return to negotiations was simply impossible, with actual all-out war being waged and civilian casualties mounting.
So diplomacy was completely off the table. What about the U.S. stance?
President Trump's stance on Israel's actions evolved quickly. Initially, he stated the U.S., of course, supported Israel. However, NBC News later reported a significant shift from an initial stance of opposition to a reluctant but firm support, citing critical intelligence about Iran's rapidly expanding nuclear arsenal.
So intelligence shifted the U.S. view.
Apparently so. Ultimately, Trump reportedly told Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to keep going, effectively giving the green light for continued operations.
Keep going. Wow. And then the U.S. got directly involved.
This was quickly followed by direct U.S. involvement, a major escalation. On June 21, 2025, the U.S. launched its own offensive, codenamed Operation Midnight Hammer.
Midnight Hammer. What did the U.S. hit?
This involved bombing critical Iranian nuclear sites: the Fordo uranium enrichment facility, the Natanz nuclear facility, and the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center.
The big three. How did they hit Fordo, given how deep it is?
The U.S. specifically utilized massive ordnance penetrators, or MOPs, which are incredibly powerful bunker-buster bombs designed to hit deep underground facilities, providing a capability that Israel's own arsenal largely lacked.
So the U.S. provided the bunker-busting power.
Precisely. President Trump declared these strikes a spectacular military success and issued a stark warning of an even stronger U.S. response if Iran dared to retaliate further. A ceasefire was declared on June 24th, bringing a temporary halt to the immediate military actions.
Okay, so major strikes by Israel and the U.S. What was the actual damage? Did they succeed?
A subsequent and comprehensive analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, in August 2025 offered a crucial damage assessment. They confirmed significant damage to Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan through detailed satellite imagery. Operations at these key critical sites were effectively brought to a halt.
Brought to a halt. Can you give specifics?
For instance, Fordo, the heavily fortified underground site, showed 12 MOP impacts and 6 massive craters, specifically targeting its vulnerable ventilation shafts. While some stabilization efforts were observed afterward, there was no dash to resume enrichment at these main sites, indicating profound disruption.
And Natanz and Isfahan.
Natanz sustained 2 MOP impacts on its underground facility. building on previous Israeli strikes that had already hit its above-ground infrastructure.
Hmm.
And Isfahan, the uranium conversion facility, had over 24 buildings hit, showing what CSIS described as extensive damage.
So significant physical destruction. What about the human element, the scientists?
Beyond the physical destruction, the Israeli strikes inflicted profoundly damaging, almost irreplaceable blows to Iran's human capital. At least 14 leading nuclear scientists were killed in total, resulting in significant damage to the knowledge base and personnel of Iran's nuclear program.
14 leading scientists. That's a huge loss of expertise.
Massive. This loss includes what we call tacit knowledge, that unwritten experiential expertise that is absolutely crucial for complex tasks like precision centrifuge operation, uranium hexafluoride conversion, sophisticated systems integration, or the intricate steps of weaponization itself.
Tacit knowledge, the stuff you can't just read in a manual.
Exactly. This kind of knowledge isn't easily found in textbooks. It's gained through years of practical experience and collaboration. This unique loss is incredibly difficult to replace and could, critically, expand Iran's weaponization and production timelines significantly. It means setting back years of collective expertise.
So the strikes definitely set the program back, both physically and in terms of know-how. But was it completely destroyed?
No. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. These strikes, as devastating as they were, did not completely eliminate Iran's program. Some infrastructure remained intact, likely underground or in dispersed locations.
Oh, what kind of activity continued?
Activity continued at what's been cryptically called Pickaxe Mountain, near Natanz, a site speculated to house vital centrifuge parts, assemblies, or perhaps even the unaccounted for 60% HEU stockpile.
Pickaxe Mountain. Sounds ominous.
And an undamaged underground facility northeast of Isfahan was also identified as a potential third enrichment site, a clandestine location that could potentially be brought online.
A secret third site.
A potential one, yes, identified through intelligence and analysis post-strike.
And what about that huge stockpile of 60% enriched uranium? Was it hit?
That's one of the most pressing and concerning unknowns. The precise location of Iran's 408.6 kilogram stockpile of 60% HEU remains unknown. Vice President J.D. Vance publicly suggested Iran likely still possessed this critical material after the strikes, meaning it could be moved and hidden.
So they might still have enough material for several bombs hidden somewhere.
It's a distinct possibility. While 50% enriched uranium could theoretically be used to build a crude nuclear explosive device, experts generally agree it would be too large to fit on a missile and would be an ineffective nuclear weapon design.
So it's not ideal for a weapon as is.
Correct. It's unlikely that Iran would build a bomb with its 60% enriched stockpile without further enrichment to higher, more efficient weapon-grade levels around 90%.
Okay. Was there any good news from the strikes from a non-proliferation view?
Well, on a more positive note for non-proliferation efforts, the technical capability to convert gaseous enriched uranium hexafluoride into uranium metal, that crucial final step for building a bomb core, was highly likely destroyed in the attacks on Isfahan. That was a significant setback for their weaponization path.
So we've seen immense physical damage and a critical blow to Iran's tacit knowledge from these strikes. But the program wasn't eradicated. What's left, and what does this mean for the future of Iran's nuclear ambitions?
It's a mixed picture. Significant damage, yes, but resilience too.
What was the U.S. position immediately after the strikes and the ceasefire?
Post-strike, the U.S. stance remained firm and uncompromising. President Trump publicly addressed Khamenei on June 27th, mincing no words, declaring, "You got beat to hell," and stating he had abandoned all efforts to lift sanctions due to Khamenei's anger, hatred, and disgust.
So no more talk of sanctions relief from Trump.
Apparently not. Despite this incredibly strong rhetoric, U.S. envoy Witkoff stated in late June that direct and mediated discussions aimed at returning to negotiations were still ongoing, but he adamantly re-emphasized the core U.S. position requiring Iran to halt all uranium enrichment.
Still insisting on zero enrichment, even after the strikes.
But that remained the U.S. line. That's a crucial point because while the immediate impact of the strikes was significant, the question of how resilient Iran's nuclear ambition truly is and how these dramatic events might reshape regional and global security in the long term remains profoundly open.
The big unknowns.
Exactly. The unknown locations of remaining infrastructure, and particularly the surviving material, are concerns that keep policymakers up at night. This brings us to the profound geopolitical implications of these events and the future outlook.
Right. Why does Iran want this capability so badly anyway? What are the motivations?
Iran's enduring motivations for nuclear ambition are incredibly complex, extending far beyond the official stance. Officially, Iran consistently claims its nuclear program is solely for peaceful purposes, primarily for energy generation.
But few outside Iran really believe that's the whole story.
Very few. Many analysts and intelligence agencies believe there's a much deeper, more fundamental motivation at play. Deterrence.
Deterrence against who? The U.S. Israel.
Primarily, yes. They view nuclear weapons as the ultimate insurance policy against existential threats, especially given the significant U.S. military presence in neighboring Iraq and Afghanistan, which Iran perceives as encircling it. A nuclear capability from this perspective could fundamentally deter invasion and prevent foreign powers from pushing Iran around on the international stage.
So it's about regime survival and national pride.
Largely, yes. There's also the element of bargaining leverage. Iran may genuinely believe it gains more diplomatic advantage from threatening to cross the nuclear threshold, from being a threshold state, than from actually doing so.
Being almost nuclear is useful.
It allows them to use their near-nuclear status as leverage for sanctions relief and other geopolitical benefits without incurring the full costs and isolation of being a declared nuclear power. It's a strategic ambiguity.
What about their regional ambitions? Does having a bomb change that?
That's a significant fear among many regional and international observers. A nuclear-armed Iran, they worry, would be emboldened to pursue an even more aggressive foreign policy, significantly increasing its support for its proxy groups across the Middle East.
The Shia Crescent idea.
Exactly. This could potentially lead to the consolidation of a sphere of influence extending from Iran through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, profoundly altering the regional balance of power.
And they've hinted the religious fatwa against nukes could change.
It's also worth noting that Iranian officials have openly admitted that the technical capability to develop nuclear weapons exists, and they've controversially hinted that the religious ruling forbidding nuclear weapons could, in fact, change at any time, adding a layer of unpredictability.
They also point fingers at Israel's nukes, don't they?
They do. Iran's foreign ministry has consistently urged the international community to address Israel's undeclared nuclear arsenal as a prerequisite for any truly effective, non-discriminatory negotiations, viewing it as a core hypocrisy in the region.
Okay, so complex motivations. What's the biggest fear if Iran does get the bomb?
One of the most terrifying specters looming over this entire situation is the very real threat of proliferation and a regional arms race.
A domino effect.
Precisely. A major overriding concern is that Iran acquiring nuclear weapons would almost certainly incentivize other regional powers to pursue their own programs, catalyzing a dangerous, destabilizing nuclear arms race across the Middle East.
Which countries are most likely to follow suit?
Countries identified by intelligence agencies and analysts as highly likely to seek nuclear capabilities in direct response to an Iranian bomb include major players like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates.
Saudi Arabia especially.
Saudi Arabia in particular has explicitly signaled its willingness to obtain a nuclear weapon if Iran detonates one, creating that potential domino effect.
What would a Middle East with multiple nuclear powers look like?
It would inevitably lead to what's termed a multipolar scenario, where more than two states possess nuclear weapons. Such a scenario is generally deemed less stable and inherently more dangerous than a bipolar system, like the Cold War dynamic between the U.S. and the USSR, where deterrence was relatively clear, if terrifying.
Why is multipolar less stable?
In a multipolar environment, dangers are more diffused, meaning threats can emerge from multiple unpredictable directions, and miscalculations are the main source of danger, as lines of communication might be less clear and leaders less predictable. Coalitions could shift rapidly, potentially increasing incentives for preemptive attacks and making the region far more volatile and prone to conflict.
And the risk of nuclear terrorism.
That's another huge fear. Heightened fears of nuclear terrorism, where nuclear assets, either material or actual weapons, could fall into extremist hands due to internal instability, regime change in a nuclear-armed state, or through the deliberate transfer of technology or weapons to radical states or terrorist organizations.
A nightmare scenario.
Absolutely. This widespread proliferation would ultimately undermine all international non-proliferation efforts and severely damage the credibility of the entire global nuclear order.
This brings us to the very core of the deterrence debate. Could mutual assured destruction, or MAD, the Cold War doctrine that prevented direct U.S.-Soviet conflict, actually work in the uniquely complex and volatile environment of the Middle East?
It's a hotly debated question. Some proponents, like the renowned scholar Kenneth Waltz, argue that a nuclear-armed Iran could bring stability through mutual deterrence with Israel, similar to the US-USSR Cold War.
Stability through nuclear weapons. That sounds counterintuitive.
They view nuclear weapons counterintuitively as weapons of de-escalation, because their ultimate destructive power makes large-scale conventional war too risky between nuclear powers.
What do the critics say?
Many scholars and strategists strongly criticize this optimistic view. They contend that deterrence is unlikely to work in the Middle East, due primarily to its complex and combustible nature, characterized by proxy wars, deep sectarian divides, and a history of miscalculation.
Why wouldn't it work?
They point to a high probability of weapons used due to the region's inherent volatility, a profound lack of effective communication channels between adversaries, and often unpredictable or volatile leadership that might not adhere to rational deterrence logic.
And the risk of smaller wars escalating.
There's also the stability-instability paradox to consider. This theory suggests that nuclear weapons, by deterring large-scale wars, might ironically tempt countries to fight small wars and engage in lower-level provocations, risking accidental escalation into a full-blown nuclear conflict in an already unstable region.
Plus, it's not just about Iran and Israel, is it?
Exactly. The bilateral deterrence model between Iran and Israel ignores Iran's independent, deep-seated rivalry with the GCC Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia, which is based on ideological, ethnic, and geopolitical competition. This complex web of rivalries could create a cascading security dilemma, leading to more power struggles and a dangerous cycle of nuclear countermeasures by Arab states, ultimately making the region far more dangerous than it is today.
And central to any discussion about a path forward is the critical role of sanctions relief, right? That's always been Iran's key demand.
Absolutely. Sanctions have profoundly impacted Iran's economy, severely restricting its vital oil exports, its primary source of revenue, and largely limiting its access to global financial systems. Iran's primary demand in every negotiation has consistently been for tangible economic benefits from sanctions relief, including firm guarantees of restored banking and trade ties with other countries.
Without economic relief, no deal.
That seems to be their bottom line. Without these, they argue, any deal is essentially meaningless window dressing. So what's next? It feels like we're truly at a crossroads, perched on the edge of a new, potentially terrifying chapter.
Do we double down on the military approach that delivered immediate results but didn't eliminate the threat? Or is there still a viable path for diplomacy, even with all this deep mistrust and animosity?
This leads us to consider the profound long-term implications. The very fabric of Middle Eastern security is at stake, and the risk of a regional nuclear arms race is not theoretical, it is a very real imminent danger.
So we need to think critically about the options.
Critical thinking is absolutely essential here. While military action offers immediate, undeniable results in damaging facilities, it can also paradoxically sow the seeds for future, more determined proliferation, potentially driving a program even further underground and making it harder to monitor.
Military action could backfire in the long run.
It's a significant risk. What's truly fascinating here is how the choices made now, in the aftermath of these strikes, will irrevocably determine whether this already volatile region descends into even greater instability, or if some new, albeit fragile and tense, equilibrium can somehow be found.
As we look at the path forward, it's abundantly clear that the diplomatic environment is severely degraded. There's just no trust left.
A profound, almost insurmountable lack of trust between the parties, fundamentally undermined by the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018 and the subsequent reinstatement of crippling sanctions.
And the strikes just made it worse.
The recent Israeli and U.S. military strikes in June 2025 further complicated matters, causing Iran to pull out of and indefinitely suspend nuclear talks, slamming the door on immediate diplomatic engagement. Iran has consistently and stubbornly rejected demands for full dismantlement of its enrichment program, viewing it as non-negotiable and absolutely essential to its national interest and sovereignty.
So, is diplomacy completely dead? Are there any openings?
Yet, despite this deep impasse, there are still glimmers of opportunities for renewed engagement, however fanned. Despite the recent dramatic events, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff publicly expressed confidence in reaching a comprehensive peace deal through renewed direct and mediated discussions in late June 2025, suggesting the U.S. hasn't given up entirely.
So the U.S. is still talking about talks?
It seems so, thus keeping the channel open. Historically, Iran has shown a readiness for negotiations when facing acute war threats and a deepening economic crisis conditions that are certainly present now.
Maybe the pressure could force them back eventually.
It's possible. And Iran had previously put forward proposals for de-escalation steps, such as freezing proxy group activities in exchange for sanctions relief. These remain points of potential leverage that could be explored if a new diplomatic window opens.
What about Iran's ability to rebuild after the strikes?
Iran's rebuilding capacity is also a crucial factor in the path forward. Whether Iran rebuilds its nuclear program to its previous dangerous levels, or even surpasses them, will fundamentally depend on Tehran's political decisions.
What influences those decisions?
These decisions will be heavily influenced by pressing internal challenges like severe drought, the ongoing economic crisis, and growing public unrest. They will also be shaped by the nature of any future diplomacy with the U.S. and, of course, any future Israeli actions.
So internal factors matter just as much as external ones.
Absolutely. While the strikes inflicted significant damage and effectively halted operations at key declared sites, the program was not completely eliminated. As we discussed, some infrastructure remained intact. Activity notably continues at Pickaxe Mountain near Natanz, and there's persistent speculation about a third enrichment site near Isfahan.
And they could rebuild underground.
Iran might also choose to move capabilities to existing or additional, more deeply buried underground facilities to safeguard them from future attacks.
Does the loss of the scientists create an opening?
Critically, the tragic loss of skilled nuclear scientists due to the Israeli strikes complicates rapid reconstitution and weaponization efforts, at least in the short to medium term. This creates a potential, albeit narrow, window for renewed diplomacy, as Iran might need time to recover its human capital.
A window of opportunity, maybe?
Perhaps. The intense international scrutiny and the recent military actions highlight the ongoing immense challenge of constraining Iran's nuclear ambitions and underscore the dire need for renewed focus on radical transparency and robust verification measures to prevent any secret nuclear activities from resurfacing.
Which brings us back to the core issue, enrichment. Is there any compromise possible there?
The persistent enrichment debate remains the absolute core sticking point in any potential negotiations. It's Iran's insistence on its right to continue uranium enrichment for civilian purposes under the Non-Proliferation Treaty versus the U.S. position, particularly from the second Trump administration, which demanded Iran dismantle its entire enrichment program, seeing any enrichment as a proliferation risk.
Zero enrichment versus the right to enrich seems irreconcilable.
It has been so far. A phased approach has been suggested as a potential compromise, where Iran would forego enrichment entirely for a defined period, say up to 5 years, and then could potentially resume at very low levels, like 3%, strictly for civilian purposes, only if fully compliant with NPT and IAEA obligations.
A temporary halt, then limited resumption under strict watch.
That's the idea. But it would require immense trust and verification, neither of which currently exists.
We also need to consider the downsides of the military option, right?
We must. We have to seriously consider the unintended consequences of military action. While undoubtedly effective in damaging facilities and hitting human capital, such strikes can also profoundly undermine future diplomatic efforts and, perhaps ironically, solidify Iran's resolve to pursue nuclear weapons with even greater determination.
It could push them over the edge.
It could. It could even push them to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty altogether, removing any remaining international oversight. Iran has certainly responded to threats with counter-threats, including clear warnings about targeting American bases in the region if conflict erupts.
And the risk of wider war is always there.
And it goes without saying, military action carries the grave, terrifying risk of widespread destruction and a catastrophic regional war across the entire Middle East. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the situation remains incredibly fluid and dangerous.
It's a complex calculation with no easy answers.
Critical thinking is essential here. While military action can offer immediate, tangible results, it also carries the potential to sow the seeds for future, more determined, and clandestine proliferation.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? As we wrap up this discussion, consider the long-term implications of everything we've talked about.
It's a lot to take in.
The future of Iran's nuclear program remains deeply uncertain and fraught with unimaginable risk. The pursuit of nuclear weapons by Iran, whether overt or clandestine, would almost certainly trigger a dangerous nuclear arms race across the Middle East, potentially involving countries you might not expect.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
What is the true cost of an unconstrained nuclear program, not just in terms of the immediate threat of war, but in the long-term reshaping of global power dynamics and regional stability? And how might that profoundly impact you directly, regardless of where you live in the world, affecting everything from energy prices to global security?
It's a question everyone should consider.
Thank you for joining us for this in-depth exploration of Iran's nuclear trajectory and its global implications. We sincerely hope you feel better informed about this critical and complex topic.
Thanks for tuning in.
To continue supporting the insights and analysis we bring you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the Global War Watch Network. We truly appreciate your time and participation.
Your support means a lot.
We also invite you to share your thoughts in the comment section below and join us on social media. You'll find all the links provided in the description.